Hi, and welcome to another episode of White and Woke at Work. I'm very pleased to be here today with my next guest, Margot Hovey. I'm Janelle Benjamin, and if you've been enjoying the series, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button below. But welcome, Margot. How are you?
So thrilled to be here with you today, Janelle.
I'm very
Thank you
happy to
for
have I'm very
thank
happy
you
to
for
have you
inviting me.
on. No problem. You're one of those people that I've encountered through the LinkedIn platform who has been really, really active and vocal about this movement for social justice and anti-racism in particular. And it was really interesting to see your death-defying dialogues that you have coming up. Can you talk to me a little bit about what's involved with a death-defying dialogue and your journey toward this work?
Well, sure. Just a little bit. First of all, about that program is a 6-week webinar series. Each session is about an hour and 15 minutes, and I'm collaborating with my colleague Christina Smith on this project. And yeah, we put it together after George Floyd was murdered, and we both felt like we had to do something. And Christina and I believe that together we're better.
Mm-hmm.
So that is kind of the intent that we came together to collaborate on. And what's beautiful about that journey actually is that we have been able to pull together people from various racial communities.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is a wonderful way to break down the silos and to have people kind of witnessing conversations which in many cases they've never witnessed before.
Right.
So that's been a very special offering that we have been able to put together.
What have you
Our
found
trick,
through those dialogues? What are the conversations like?
we start, and I always really like to start with people's own stories, like what brought them to this meeting that we're having together.
Right.
Because I believe that it's in those stories that we begin to unpack and understand our individual worldviews.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is our values, our beliefs, and our assumptions. What were the experiences that shaped those worldviews?
Right.
And because once you can surface them, you can start to choose them. You can actually make a decision. Do I want to continue to maintain this belief? Is it servicing me now?
And so, what have been your experiences throughout your life that have shaped your worldviews, that have made you the the person that you are today, that can be on an episode of White and Woke, and you're an active anti-racist?
So I live in Montreal.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who are watching and don't know, Montreal is an island. And we are surrounded, is a bilingual island, but mostly it's a Francophone island. And we are surrounded by Indian reservations. And it took me until I was 40 years old and living in a different city to meet a man from the Mohawk Nation. I mean, that's remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that in my entire upbringing, I had never met anybody from the Mohawk Nation.
And how old were you thereabouts when you met this gentleman?
40,
Okay.
40 years old.
Yeah.
So, and during and at that same time, um, my I was living in Toronto,
Mm-hmm.
and my best friend in the office at that time was also a Mohawk.
Mm-hmm.
And about 6 months later, my sister gave birth to my beloved niece, Sahara, who's biracial.
Mm-hmm.
So I come from a family that we are 13th generation. So What I mean by that is 13 generations ago, the first Hovey arrived on Turtle Island from England.
Okay. Turtle Island, for those viewers who aren't familiar, is in the indigenous name for Canada.
Actually, North America.
North America, there you go.
Well, the Americas.
The Americas generally.
Yeah. And his name was Richard Hovey, and he was, so the Hoveys were in Massachusetts for 5 generations. And at that time, they were particularly, Ebenezer Hovey was a loyalist and was kind of served the Queen of England, as it were, and was in the military and was kicked out of America, was run out of America during the War of Independence. So he came up to Quebec.
Okay.
And at that time, the governments of Quebec were the Upper Canada and Lower Canada.
Okay.
And they were awarding land, unceded land, that they confiscated. And they were so-called awarding that land to loyalists.
Okay.
And the amount of land that you got depended upon your level in the military. So because he was a general, because he was a general, he was awarded 40,000 hectares of land around a lake in the eastern townships east of Montreal called Lake Massawippi. Beautiful land. And that's an enormous piece of land.
Right.
And all he had to do was to build a domicile, and it was his.
Okay.
So he built his first domicile, and where that is currently is a 5-star hotel called Manoir Hovey. So I come from a very white family, yeah. And all of a sudden, in this one generation, the face of the family has changed. So that's an enormous, that's a really big shift for the family. So
and a shift in what sense? What has changed for your family?
So both my one niece is biracial and my other niece was born in China. And so what was once a white family is no longer a white family.
Okay.
That's the change.
And these are in-laws? Somebody's married into a racialized person?
No, my sister was involved with a Caribbean man.
Okay.
Who's actually no longer alive. And in the other case, my niece was adopted from China.
And how has having racialized members of your family changed your family?
It's changed everything. Yeah. So everything I do at this point is to do whatever I can to ensure that my nieces have the same privileges that I've had as a white woman in Canada.
And you do that because, is it just because it's personal now that it makes the issue so serious for you?
So I was definitely very personal now. And I really, my scales were lifted off of my eyes.
Right.
Because up until that time when I was 40, I had no relationships with anybody outside of the white structures.
Right. So what does it look like then for you, who now has racialized members of your family, to peel back those layers and ensure that they feel included in, like you said, white society and in your white family? What does that look like?
The peeling eyes.
No, what are you doing? Give me some examples of some of the things that you're doing to ensure that these little racialized people can feel included in your family and really see themselves reflected.
So I started off by conducting research amongst diversity practitioners and facilitators.
Okay.
These were people who were leaders of cultural and anti-racist organizations in Canada at the municipal, provincial, and federal levels.
So why did you start that research? What did you feel was the gap, or that what was needed that you needed to begin that work?
I wanted to understand what is the experience of being able to facilitate at that level and have those experiences become transformational. Because what I'd witnessed
Mm-hmm.
was that the very best were able to create structures where people could transform their worldviews. And I wanted to know, how was that possible? Like, what was it like within their view of the world
Mm-hmm.
to make that happen, to be able to do that?
And so tell me more. What are
Yeah,
the
so what I
research?
discovered was that what I call worldview competencies and transformative capacities. And they're essentially leadership skills, which are evolutionary,
Mm-hmm.
which are developmental. And it's like being on a continuum. So
Right.
an example would be on the cultural continuum. At the very at 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 this end, what you've got is somebody who's locked into a very traditional worldview.
Mm-hmm.
All they know is coming from one cultural perspective. That's all
Right.
they know.
Mm-hmm.
And at the other end of that spectrum, you have the ability to view from multiple cultural perspectives and without valuing one over another.
Okay. And so how do you relate that to your nieces and the people in your own family?
So I began to understand what kind of actions and awakenings I could pursue to invite other people around me to start to consider their worldviews and what the implications of them are.
What are those implications? What did you find?
Well, that when you're locked in an individual cultural, racial, gender, I mean, it can be more broadly applied.
Mm-hmm.
You are, by definition, excluding everything outside of that circle.
Yes. And so now what does that look like for your family members? Like what are you doing? Give me some examples of some of the things that you are doing to ensure their full inclusion.
So, I mean, most of it is very, um, do you mean on a personal level? Like,
Yeah,
I'm
of
not
course.
quite
Like, so
sure.
we're not talking academic. We're talking about you. I genuinely want to get to know you and some of the things that you're doing personally on a personal level to ensure that, you mentioned one of your nieces is racialized, having an East Asian heritage. So are there things that you're doing to ensure that that East Asian heritage is included in their worldview?
So, well, that's an interesting question because she is in a place um, where she has not wanted to include her Asian heritage.
Okay. How old is she?
So, 19.
Oh, okay, teenager, a grown up.
So she's just reaching a point where she lives in Boston, so she's an American citizen.
Mhm.
And she's just getting to the point where this year she's becoming politicized. I mean, she's just, awakening to her own um, reality. And so for her, it has been about holding, being where she is
Mhm.
and telling her it's okay to be there
Right.
and stepping with her as she starts to choose, a broader, more expansive circle. Because honestly, to have, it's scary, and I worry about her a lot. She is, um, yeah, she has to be very careful about, where she is and when she's there. And she's stigmatized, and has been since the beginning.
Mhm. And so what are some of the things that we can do, I guess, as a collective to stop the stigma of certain groups? What do you suggest?
For me, it's about being human and being in relationship. So for me, it's about, breaking through these constructs that we have that separate us,
Yes.
and creating relationship and finding out, what we need to do to support, and love those people that we're in relationship with.
That's phenomenal. I'm glad to hear you say that. And I'm sure it speaks through everything that you're doing, both personally and professionally. So, in terms of, the actions that we can take in our workplace and the things that you're doing through your is it diversity dialogues? I think I lost the name.
Death
Death
defying
defying
dialogue.
dialogue. Death defying dialogues. Um, does it is it considering stigma and the things that groups can do? What would somebody learn in your death defying dialogue about anti-racism?
So what we were looking to do at that time is to create a safe space to talk about race,
Mm-hmm.
because we found that it has become very politicized to talk about race, and not and people don't necessarily feel safe enough to talk about it, and need spaces where they do feel safe to engage in those conversations, as awkward, as difficult, as inflammatory, as challenging as they can be.
Are those conversations happening between ethnicities and races and genders, or is it largely just a white audience? Who's attending?
Well, our intention is to have a 50-50 split.
Okay. And is that organically happening?
We're really challenged with our sales.
Okay.
Neither of us, have come from that kind of background. So it's a, it's an evolutionary, it's an
It will
evolutionary
build and
thing.
it will grow as more people get familiar with what you're offering.
Well, and it would be interesting, very interesting to provide this opportunity to organizations as well.
Yes.
Because I think that these conversations, what we need are conversations. We don't only need bean counters, and, kind of like, um, stats aren't going to save us.
Hmm.
They're important, but they don't create the glue that, helps to stick us together as a global community, do they?
No, no. So, Margot, tell me a little bit more about, I guess, your upbringing and, you talked a little bit about your family history, but what was it like growing up in Montreal? Were you always, justice minded and advocating on behalf of, racialized communities, or is it really just because you have these family members now that you,
Just
well,
No, I mean, I think, my heart was open, but, that being said, my mom, um, I come from a family on my maternal side
Hmm.
of suffragettes.
Right.
So the upbringing that I got from my maternal line was around, was really around gender rights.
Okay.
And what I understand, as having inherited that line, is that those people did not include, you know, um, Black, people of color, anybody other than white women.
Hmm.
And so where I find myself in my life is looking for opportunities to offer up, what that inheritance brings me, and to, open it up to a real perspective of, what is Canadian society and where Canadian women are.
Yeah. Where do you think they are right now, as a whole, as a collective? If we could just generalize.
Well, in COVID, I mean, things have really gotten pretty tense out here, don't you think? I mean, people trying to work with, and trying to, deal with their children at home,
Hmm.
and not, and it's been the women who've, had to step back from, not had to, but have, in a way have had
Hmm.
um, to keep the children thriving, and trying to, and nobody's known what to do with this distance learning,
Right.
and they've refused to pay for people, assistance from people who have some experience. They just wing it.
Hmm. Oh, you
So
think?
I think that, a lot of the women have paid, a lot of people that I talk to have paid for this, and it's very tough out there.
Yeah. I mean, people are weighing it in terms of how to make it economically, financially, socially, but through their even their mental health, right? Just trying to cope with the double pandemic, which is, racism and COVID-19. It is a difficult time. So how have you been dealing with that?
But it is, on the other hand, you know, the fact that all of this exposure has happened, and that the cracks in the system, I mean, COVID has really created this situation where the cracks in the system that doesn't work,
Hmm.
are being exposed.
Yes.
And I mean, I take that as opportunity.
I was just about to ask you, what do you think are those opportunities that we have now through these various, cracks in the system?
Well, here we are today, aren't we, Jenna?
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
So, I mean, we're able to reach out to each other.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm really grateful for that. And I know that, I personally, um, there's no turning around for me. And it's a relief for me to find others who want to, talk. Because that hasn't been the case for the past 20 years. It has just not been the case.
Hmm. What has it been like for you?
What I've discovered, and this may sound very naive, but what I've discovered in Canada is that our paperwork is fabulous, around the mosaic. You know, it's a
Hmm.
beautiful thing. And we really are loath to confront our own histories,
Yes.
our own relationship to slavery, our own relationship to unregarded, treaties and relations with Indigenous people,
Hmm.
and colonization at large, and the fact that it has global roots, and our role in it. And we really are, we we love to say, look at them in America, they're so bad, they have all these things happening. And it wouldn't happen here,
Yeah.
but it happens every day. Every single day.
Yeah. How do you get that awareness, Margot, as a white woman? Why can you see that? And so many women, you know, in your generation, they keep their eyes closed to it, and they haven't waken up to, you know, those cracks. They don't see them. They don't see the problems in society. What makes you different? And how do we get them there?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's a lot of fear.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fear that, you know, of the unknown, and also of like not wanting to let go of resources.
Right. Yeah.
Of being afraid of like, what does power sharing look like? Like, you
Mm-hmm.
know, most people aren't going to use these words, but I think that, you know, this is where the roots are.
Yes. I mean, you make me think, you know, you started off the conversation and talking about the 40 acres of land given to your
40,000 hectares.
40,000 hectares. Wow. Right? I mean, 40 acres and a mule were just promised to the Black Americans in the South, and which were never provided. And what would that have meant in terms of, you know, generational wealth and economic advancement and
Exactly.
opportunity today, right? Reparations is a conversation that too many people are just, they shy away from. What are your thoughts on that?
So for me, um, it's funny because a very dear friend of mine says, well, you know, I'd like to bring you in for workshops, but you know, our leaders don't want to hear about their privilege anymore.
Yeah, and that's a thing. That is a thing, right? Like,
Men. So for me, the point is to, you know, make the privilege available to everybody.
right.
To me, that's the point.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, I know about life in that it fleets by so quickly and it's gone and it's over. And material um, material gain is fleeting as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it can't be counted on, actually.
Right.
Um, but what there is, I think that we're all, you know, we're all inheritors.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I'm not afraid of that kind of sharing.
Why? What makes you different?
I think I understand, you know, for one thing, my father's family story was, you know, great wealth for a very, very, very long time.
Mm-hmm.
And then they lost it all in the Depression in the 30s.
Okay.
And what I learned from my grandparents, so it was their generation that lost that.
Mm-hmm.
I never heard of, you know, nobody ever complained to me. And the lesson that I learned was that, you know, it's love that matters.
Right.
And, you know, that has always stayed with me. Um, and it's really my mother's, you know, it's my maternal line that's taught me that, I mean, and they came from a very Christian perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And that perspective was that, you know, we're all God's, you know,
Yeah.
and God is within all of us,
Mm-hmm.
and that we're all equal from the beginning,
Right.
and that what we are blessed with is all of ours. So
That's right. Your core, it's just good Christian values. And I
You
mean,
know,
it makes sense to me.
yeah, I actually don't, um, my spiritual values are, um, they're not just within, I kind of evolved um, from there,
Yeah. We
but
all do.
that divinity piece, that loving piece is definitely there.
Yeah. And I think that's important to just have that love for one another, that humanity, that recognition, like you said, that, the privilege should be given to all of us to have love and give love and receive it. So, I mean, it's just part of being human, right? I think
That's it.
another guest has
And
said
and
that.
and and what follows from there, which I want to say out loud, is the security,
Mhm.
of having employment, is the security of having roofs over our heads, is the security of being looked after, our health and everything else.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Margot, I want to thank you so much for coming and sharing your story with me today. I want to encourage the viewers that if they need to reach out to you for any reason, they can find you on LinkedIn as Margot Hovey Ritter, or of course at margothovey.com. That's Hovey. And I'm, of course, Janelle Benjamin. You can reach me at allthingsequitable.ca or JB underscore equitable on Twitter. And of course, Janelle Benjamin on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for coming on, Margot. It was a pleasure having you and hearing your story and sharing your anti-racism journey with me. And to the viewers, don't forget to click like, share, and subscribe below. Thank you so much again, Margot.
Have a great day.
You as well. Bye.